the people that listen, and protect me from our enemies. Amen. Joshua 8. Now the Lord said to Joshua, do not fear or be dismayed, intimidated. Do not fear, the Lord is with you. Take all men of war with you, set out, go up to Ai. Instead of giving the king Ai, his people, his city, and his land into your hand, you shall do the same to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, except that you shall take only its spoil and its cattle as plunder for yourself. Set up an ambush for the city behind it on the west side. So Joshua set out with all the people of war to go up against Ai. And then Joshua chose 30,000 valiant men and sent them out at night. He commanded them, saying, listen closely, you are going to lie and wait and ambush the city from behind it. Do not go very far away from the city, but all of you be ready. Then I and all the people who are with me will approach the city, and when they come out to meet us for battle, as they did the first time, we will run away from them. They will come out after us until we have lured them away from the city, because they will say, they are running from us, as they did before, so we will run from them. Then you will emerge from the ambush and take possession of the city, for the Lord your God will hand it over to you. When you have taken the city, you shall set it on fire, and you shall do exactly as the Lord commanded. See, I have commanded you. So Joshua sent them off, and they went to a place for the ambush and stayed hidden between Bethel and Ai on the west side of Ai, and Joshua spent that night among the people in Gibeah. Now Joshua got up early in the morning and assembled the people and went out with the elders of Israel before the people to Ai. Then all the fighting men who were with him went up in advance and arrived in front of the city and camped on the north side of Ai. Now there was a rainbow between them and Ai. And Joshua took about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai on the west side of the city. So they stationed the people, all the army, the main encampment that was north of the city, in their rear guard on the west side of the city, and Joshua spent the night in the valley. Now when the king and the people of Ai saw it, the men of the city hurried and got up early and went out to meet Israel in battle. The king and all his people at the appointed time and place before the desert plain, the Arabia, but he did not know that there was an ambush against him waiting behind the city on the west side. So Joshua and all Israel pretended to be defeated by them and ran toward the wilderness. Then all the people who were in the city were called together to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were lured away from the city. Not a man was left in Ai or Bethel who had not gone out after Israel. So they left the city open and unguarded, and they pursued Israel. Then the Lord said to Joshua, reach out with the spear that is in your hand and point it toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand. So Joshua reached out with his spear in his hand and pointed it toward the city. The men in ambush emerged quickly from their hiding place. And when Joshua stretched out his hand, they ran and entered the city and captured it and quickly set the city on fire. When the men of Ai turned back and looked, behold, the smoke of the city was ascending toward the city, and they had no opportunity to run this way or that way. Then the people who had been running to the wilderness turned back toward the pursuers. When Joshua and all Israel saw that the men in the ambush had taken the city and that the smoke of the city was ascending, they turned back and struck down the men of Ai. Then the others came out of the city to confront the men of Ai as they returned, so that they were trapped in the midst of Israel, some on this side and some on that side. Then Israel struck them until none of them survived or escaped it. But they took the king of Ai alive and brought him to Joshua. When Israel had finished killing all the inhabitants of Ai in the field in the wilderness where they pursued them, and they had all fallen by the edge of the sword until they were destroyed. Then all Israel returned to Ai and struck it with the edge of the sword. And all who fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000, all the people of Ai. For Joshua did not withdraw his hand with which he stretched out the spear until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Israel took only the livestock and the spoil of that city as plunder for themselves, according to the word of the Lord, which he commanded Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai and made it a rubber sheet, forever ever a desolate until this day. He hanged the body of the king of Ai on a tree, leaving it there until evening at sunlight. Joshua gave a command, and they took the body down from the tree and dumped it at the entrance of the city gate, and piled a great heap of stones over it that stands to this day. Then Joshua built an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, on Mount of Ebal. Just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the sons of Israel, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar on cut stones, on which no one has wielded an iron tool, and they offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord and sacrificed peace offerings. And there, in the presence of the son of Israel, Joshua wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses, which Moses had written. All Israel, the stranger, as well as the native born among them, with their elders and officers and their judges, stood on either side of the ark before the Levitical priests, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Half of them stood in front of the Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of the Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded at first to bless the people of Israel. Then afterward Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and curse, according to all that is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses had commanded which Joshua did not read before the entire assembly of Israel, including the women and the children and the foreigners who were living among them. Joshua chapter 9. Now when all the kings who were beyond the Jordan in the hill country and in the lowland at the western edge of the hills of Judea and all along the coast of the great Mediterranean Sea toward Lebanon, the Hittite and Amorite, the Canaan, Perizzite and Hivite, and the Jezreelite heard of this army and its victories over Jericho and Ai. They gathered together with one purpose to fight with Joshua and with Israel. But when the people of Gibeon, the Hivites, heard that Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they too acted craftily and cunningly, and they set out and took along provisions, but took worn-out sacks on their donkeys and wineskins, leather bottles that were worn out and split open and patched together, and worn out and patched sandals on their feet, and worn out clothes, and all their supply of food was dry and had turned to crumbs. They went to Joshua in the camp at Gilead and said to him and the men of Israel, "We have come from a far country, so now make a covenant treaty with us." But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, "Perhaps you are living with our land. How then can we make a covenant treaty with you?" They said to Joshua, "We are your servants." Then Joshua said to them, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They said to him, "Your servants have come from a country that is very far away because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard the news about him and all the remarkable things that he did in Egypt, and everything that he did to two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and to Og, the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashria. So our elders and all the residents of our country said to us, take provisions for the journey and go to meet the sons of Israel, and say to them, we are your servants. Now make a covenant treaty with us. This bread of ours was hot fresh when we took it along our provision from our houses on the day we left to come to you. Now look, it is dry and has turned to crumbs. These wineskins which we filled were new, and look, they are spit. Our clothes and our sandals are wore out because of this very long journey that we had to make. So the men of Israel took some of their own provisions and offered them in friendship, and foolishly did not ask for the counsel of the Lord. Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant treaty with them to let them live, and the leaders of the congregation of Israel swore an oath to them. It happened that 3 days after they had made a covenant treaty with them, the Israelites heard that they were actually their neighbors and that they were living among them. Then the sons of Israel set out and came to their cities on the third day. Now the cities of the Hivites were Gibeon and Shavah and Berith and Kiriath and Jearim. But the sons of Israel did not strike them, because the leaders of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, to spare them. And all the congregation murmured, expressing great dissatisfaction against the leaders. But all the leaders said to the whole congregation, we have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, so now we cannot touch them. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live so that the wrath of God does not come upon us for violating the oath which we have sworn to them. The leader said to them, let them live as our slaves. So they became the cutters and gatherers of fire, wood and water carriers for the entire congregation, just as the leaders had said of them. Joshua called the Hivites men and said, why did you receive us, saying, we live very far away from you? Then in fact you live among us. Now therefore you are cursed, and you shall always be slaves, both cutters and gatherers of firewood, and water carriers for the house of my God. They replied to Joshua and said, because your servants were told in no certain terms that the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the land inhabitants before you, we feared greatly for our lives because of you, and so we did this deceptive thing. Now look, we are in your hands. Do to us as it seems good and right in your sight. So that is what he did to them. He rescued them from the hands of the Israelites, and they did not kill them. Now on that day Joshua made them cutters and gatherers of firewood and water carriers for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord, to this day in place which he would choose. Joshua 10. When Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had captured Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and its king, so he had done to Ai and its king, and that the residents of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were living among them, he and his people feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. So Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, sent word to Hakum, king of Hebron, and to Param, king of Jerath, to Javiah, king of Lachish, and to Deborah, king of Midian, saying, come up to me and help me, and let us attack Gibeon with a combined army, because it has made peace with Joshua and with the sons of people of Israel. Then the 5 kings of Edomites, the kings of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jeremiah, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eliam gathered together and went up, and they with all their armies, and they camped by Gibeon and fought against it. So the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua at the camp in Gilead, saying, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us, for all 5 of the kings of the Amorites who live in the hill country have assembled against us." So Joshua went up from Gilead, and all the people of war with him, and all the men of valor. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear them, because I have given them into your hand. Not one of them shall stand before you." So Joshua came upon them, suddenly surprising them by marching uphill all night from Gilead. And the Lord caused them to panic, and be confused before Israel, and he struck them dead in a great slaughter of Gibeon, and chased them along the way that goes up to Beth-horon, and struck them as far as the Ezei in Micah. As they fled before Israel, while they were at the descent of Behar, the Lord threw them down large stones of hell from heaven on them as far as Ezei, and they died. More Amorites died because of the hailstones than those whom the sons of Israel killed with the sword. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord on the day when the Lord handed over the Amorites to the sons of Israel. And Joshua said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Aijalon." So the sun stood still and the moon stopped until the nation of Israel took revenge upon their enemies. It is not written in the book of Joshua. So the sun stood still in the middle of the sky and was in no hurry to go down for about a whole day. There has not been a day like that before it or after it, when the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua and all with him returned to the camp of Gilead. Now these 5 Amorite kings fled and hid themselves in the cave at Machpelah. And Joshua was told the 5 kings had been found and are hidden in the cave of Machpelah. Joshua said, "Roll large stones against the mouth of the cave and assign men by it to guard them. But do not stay there yourself. Pursue your enemies and attack them from the rear. Do not allow them to enter the cities, for the Lord your God has given them into your hand." Now when Joshua and the sons of Israel had finished striking the Amorites dead in a very great defeat until they were wiped out, and so the surviving remnant among them had entered the fortified cities, all the people returned to the camp to Joshua at Machpelah in peace. No one uttered a threatening word against any of the sons of Israel. Then Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the caves and bring out to me those 5 Amorite kings from the cave." They did so and brought these 5 Amorite kings out to the cave to him: the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jermeoth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Ephraim. When they brought these kings out to Joshua, Joshua called for all the men of Israel and told the commanders of the men of war who had gone with him, "Come up close, put your feet on the necks of these kings." So they came forward and put their feet on their necks of the 5 kings. Joshua said to them, "Do not fear or be intimidated. Be strong and courageous, for this is what the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you are about to fight." Then afterward Joshua struck them with his sword and put them to death, and he hung them on 5 trees, and he hung on the trees until evening. At sunset, Joshua gave a command, and they took the bodies down from the trees and threw them into the cave where the kings had hidden themselves, and placed large stones over the mouth of the cave, where they remain to this very day. Now Joshua captured Makkedah on that day and struck it and its kings with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed it and everyone who was in it. He left no survivor. So he did to the king of Magiah, just as he had done to the king of Jericho. Joshua 6, verse 21. Then Joshua and all Israel with him went on from Makkedah to Libnah and fought against Libnah. The Lord gave it also, along with its king, into the hands of Israel, and Joshua struck it and every person who was in it with the edge of the sword. He left no survivor in it. So he did to the king of Libnah, just as he had done to the king of Jericho. And Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Libnah to Lachish, and they camped by it, and they fought against it. The Lord gave Lachish into the hands of Israel, and Joshua captured it on the second day and struck it and every person who was in it with the edge of the sword, just as he had done to Libnah. Then Harazim king of Gezer went up to help Lachish and Joshua and struck him and his people down until he had left him no survivor. And Joshua and all Israel with him went to from Lachish to Eldon, and encamped by it and fought against it. They captured it on that day and struck it with the edge of the sword in all. And on that day he utterly destroyed every person who was in it, just as he had done to Lachish. Then Joshua and all Israel went with him, went up from Elam to Hebron, and they fought against it. And captured and struck it, and its king and all its cities and all the persons who were in it with the edge of the sword, and he left no survivor, just as he had done to Ephraim and all Israel. With him he returned to Debris and fought against it. He captured it with its king in it, all its cities, and they struck them with the edge of the sword and utterly destroyed every person who was in it. He left no survivor, just as he had done to Hebron. So Joshua did to Debir and its king, as he had done also to Libnah and its king. So Joshua struck all the land, the hill country, and the Negev, south country, and the lowland, and the slopes. That descended to the Dead Sea and all their kings. He left no survivor, but he utterly destroyed all who bred, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 16. Joshua struck them from Kadesh Barnea, even as far as Gaza, and all the country of Goshen, even as far as Gibeon. Joshua captured all these kings in their land at one time, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. So Joshua, all Israel with him, returned to the camp of Gilgal. Then north from Canaan taken, Joshua chapter 11. Then when Jabin of King Hazar heard of Israel's other victories, he sent word to Joab king of Moab and to the king of Shamir, and the king of Asarath, and the kings who were in the north, in the hill country, and in the area, the plain south of Sinriath, the sea of Galilee, and in the lowland, and all the hills of Dor, and on the west, to the Canaanite in the east and in the west, and to the Amorite and the Hittite and Perizzite and Jezreelite, and in the hill country, and the Hivite at the foot of Mount Hermon, in the land of Mizpah. They went out, and they all their armies with them, as many people as the sand on the seashore, with very many horses and chariots. So all these kings met, and they came and encamped together at the water of Miriam to fight against Israel. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid because of them, for tomorrow about this time I'm going to hand over all of them, slain by the sword, to Israel. You shall hamstring, disable their horses, and set fire to their chariots." So Joshua and all the people who were with him came against them suddenly by the waters of Miriam and attacked them. The Lord handed them over to Israel, who struck them and pursued them as far as Great Sidon and Mesrephaim, and eastward as far as the valley of Mizpeh. They struck them down until no survivors were left. Joshua did to them as the Lord had told him. He hamstrung, disabled their horses, and set fire to the chariots. At that time, Joshua turned back and captured Hazael and struck its king dead with the sword, for Hazael previously was the head of all these kingdoms. They struck all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. There was no one left who bred, and he set fire to Hazael. Joshua captured all the cities of these kings and all their kings, and he struck them with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 16. But Israel did not burn any of these cities that stood walled with warfare on their mounds, except Hazael alone, which Joshua burned. The sons of Israel took as their plunder all the spoil of these cities and the cattle, but they struck every man with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them. They left no one alive. Just as the Lord had commanded Moses, the servant to Moses, had commanded Joshua, so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So Joshua took all this land, the city hill country, all the Negev south country, and all the land of Goshen, the lowland, the Arabah plain, the hill country of Israel, and its lowland, from Mount Halak that rises towards Seir in the south, even as far as Bagad in the valley of Lebanon at the foot of Mount Hermon. In the north, he captured all their kings and struck them and put them to death. Joshua waged war with all these kings a long time, at least 5 years. There was no city that made peace with the Israelites except the Hivites living in Gibeon. They took all the others in battle. For it was the purpose of the Lord to harden their hearts to meet Israel in battle, so that Israel would utterly destroy them, that they would receive no mercy, but that Israel would destroy them, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Then Joshua came at that time and cut off the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Deborah, from Edom, and from all the hill country of Judah and all the hill country of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. There were no Anakim left in the land of the children of Israel, only in Gaza and Gath and Ashdod of Philistia. Some remained. So Joshua took the whole land of Canaan according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and Joshua gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to the divisions by the tribes. So the land had rest from war. So Joshua 12. Now these are the kings of the land whom the sons of Israel defeated, in whose land they possessed beyond the Jordan toward the east from the valley of the river, the Arnon and Mount Hebron, in all the Arabia plain to the east, Sihon, the king of the Amorites who lived in Heshron, and ruled from Ariel, I don't know, which is on the edge of the valley of the river Arion, both the middle of the valley and half of Gilead, and as far as the brook Jabbok, which is the border of the sons of Amiel. In the Arabia plain as far as the sea of Shinnereth, whatever that name is, Cinnereth, Galilee eastward, and as far as the sea of Arabia, the side of Dead Sea eastward toward the Beth Jezreel, and southward to the foot of the slopes of Mount Pisgah, in the territory of Og, king of Bashan, from of the remnant of the Rebbean, who lived at Ashriaph and at Edria. I don't even know if I'm saying these names right. I'm not even pronouncing them right because I don't know how to pronounce them because they're too difficult to pronounce. And ruled over Mount Herion and Salika, whatever, and in all Bashan to the border of the Gershonites and the Machiites, and over half of Gilead as far as the border of Salon, king of Hebshon. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the sons of Israel defeated them, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave their land as a possession to the Reubenites and the Gileadites and the half tribe of Messiah. Numbers chapter 21, verse 32, verse 33, Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 3. These are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the sons of Israel defeated on the west side of the Jordan, from Bagad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir. Joshua gave their land to the tribes of Israel as a possession according to the divisions. In the hill country, in the lowland foothills, in the Arabia plain on the slopes, descending to the Dead Sea, and in the wilderness and in the Negev south country, the lands of the Hiviite, the Amorite, and the Canaan, and Amorite, and the Canaanite, the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. The king of Jericho won, the king of Jericho won. The king of Ai, which is beside Bethel, won. The king of Jerusalem won. The king of Hebron won. The king of Jeremiah won. The king of Lachish won. The king of Eljon won. The king of Gezer won. The king of Debir won. The king of Gezer won. The king of Hebron won. The king of Arad won. The king of Libya won. The king of Adullam won. The king of Mordecai won. The king of Bethel won. The king of Tobiah won. The king of Hephir won. The king of Aphiat won. The king of Lasharan won. The king of Median won. The king of Persia won. The king of Shabian Miran won. The king of Assyria won. The king of Tadia won. The king of Median won. I don't even know. I didn't pronounce the names right because I don't know how to pronounce it. The king of Kadesh won, the king of Jocham and Carmel won, the king of Dor and the heights of Dor, the king of Goliam and Gilead won, the king of Tisra won, and all 31 kings. So Joshua chapter 13. Now Joshua was old, advanced in years. And the Lord said to him, "You have grown old and advanced in years, and very substantial portions of the land remain to be possessed. This is the land that remains, all the regions of the Philistines and all those of the Gershurites, from the Shire borderway, which is the east of Egypt, at the southern end of the Canaan, northward to the border of Ekron, all of it regarding as Canaan, the Canaanite, the 5 rivers of the Philistines, the Gizite, the Eshelite, the Eshion, the Ashiite, the Gilead, and Ekronite, and the Evite, in the south of all the land of the Canaanite and Myriad that belongs to the Sidonians, the Sidonians, as far as Ephiac to the border of the Amorite, in the land of Gibeah, and all Lebanon toward the east from Gad below Mount Haran on the entrance of Hamath. As for all the inhabitants of the hill country, from Lebanon to Misrephoth, Misrephothmaim, even all the Sidonians, I will drive them out before Israel. Only allot the land to Israel as an inheritance, just as I have commanded you. So now divide this land west of the Jordan as an inheritance for the 9 tribes and half tribe of Messiah. With the other half tribe of Messiah, the Reubenites and Gileadites received their inheritance, which Moses gave them beyond the Jordan eastward, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave to them. From Uriah on the edge of the valley of the river Arnon, in the city in the middle of the valley, in all the plain of Medeba as far as Daban, and all the cities of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reside in Heshbon as far as the border of the Amorites. In Gilead, in the territory of the Gershurites and Meshurites, and all Mount Hebron, and all Bashan as far as the Silites. The entire kingdom of Og and Bashan, who reigned in Esher and Earlier, he alone was left of the remnant of the Arabian giants, for Moses struck them and deposed them. But the sons of Israel did not possess the Gershites or the Magites, for Gersha and Magas live among Israel to this day. I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce these hard words when they're so difficult. So difficult. So sorry for my speech. It was only to the tribe of Levi that Moses gave no territory as an inheritance. The offerings by fire to the Lord, the God of Israel, are the inheritance as he told him. So Moses gave an inheritance to the tribe of the sons of Reuben according to their families. Their territory was from Area, which is on the edge of the valley of the river Arnon, in the city which is in the middle of the valley, in all the plain by Medeba, with Hashan and all its cities which are on the plain, city of Daban, and Bama and Ba and Bethba and Mian, and Jahaz and Kadamath and Mephiel, and Karian and Sabian and Zeria, Syria, and on the hill of the valley. This is so frustrating. In Beth Peor and the slopes of Pergash and Beth Jessimoth. I don't know. Even all the cities of the plain and all the city kingdom of Silan, king of the Amorites, who reside in Heshbon, when Moses struck down along with the leaders of Midian, Evi and Rechem and Zer and Her and Reba and the princes of Silan, who lived in the land. The sons of Israel also killed Balaam the son of Beor, the diviner, soothsayer, and the sword among the rest of their slain. Numbers chapter 31, verse 16. The border of the sons of Reuben was the Jordan. This was the inheritance of the sons of Reuben according to their families with their cities and villages. Moses also gave an inheritance to the tribe of Gad, to the sons of Gad according to their families. Their territory was Jazer and all the cities of Gilead and half the land of the sons of Amion, as far as Uriah and east of Reba. And from Hebron as far as Rebia, Mizrah, and Batolium, and from Miriah as far as the border of Dibria, and in the valley, Beth Hebron and Beth Neria, Succoth, and Zapion, and the rest of the kingdoms of Sidon, king of Heshbon, and with the Jordan as border as far as the lower end of the sea of Shinir, Galilee, east of the Jordan. This is the inheritance of the sons of God, according to their families, with their cities and their villages. Moses also gave an inheritance to the half-tribe of Messiah in it. Was for the half-tribe of the sons of Messiah, according to their families. Their region eternal from Medium and all Bashan, the entire kingdom of Og, came of Bashan and all the towns of Jair, which are in Bashan, 60 cities. Also half of Gilead with Ashraf, Ashtaroth, and Edrei, the cities of kingdom of Og and Bashan. These were the sons of Mira, the son of Messiah, for half of the sons of Mercy according to their families' clans. There are the territories which Moses distributed as an inheritance in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan of Jericho to the east. But to the tribe of Levi, Moses did not give an inheritance. The Lord, the God of Israel, is their inheritance, as he told them. So, yeah. That was 8 to 13. Tomorrow I read 14 to 20. What's that? 14 to 20. And I'm supposed to be getting a book today. So maybe I'll read that today. And I read the birth of the Bible tomorrow morning around 6 in the morning. Because I need to get some sleep during the night. So, okay. What Christians believe about the Trinity in simple terms of Christians believe. I'm about to start the live over and just read this